And it was just so fascinating to see 9 weeks at 70 hours of work being able to be produced exactly the way I was producing it in 3 hours. But every time I get into these, I'm working with these developers, I'm working with, technical teams, the CEOs. Every time I kept going into these steps in my career, I was the only woman. And I always had to talk louder and talk faster, because if I couldn't get my voice in, I wasn't going to be heard, because nobody in that room was going to let me in the conversation. And I was always amazed that that was a very common theme from 1995, 97 to 2004 to 2008. And as we started progressing forward, so now jump forward with blended, we started to see the exact same problems again.
Leadership Story Talks, where we discuss the practices that engage, motivate, develop, retain, and attract people to businesses. We'll give you principles and tools based on real-world stories to leverage listening and storytelling to become a better leader and management professional. Leadership Story Talks is produced by Narrative, a company that focuses on personal storytelling for business.
Welcome to Leadership Story Talks. I'm Jerome DeRoy, CEO of Narrative.
And I'm Julienne Ryan, and it's great to be here.
Great to see you. Before we move on to introducing our guest for today, I'd like to remind our listeners to please subscribe to the podcast wherever you find your podcasts and leave a review, because that really drives word of mouth. And also, you can check out our YouTube channel in this episode's notes, where you can see us do this interview, as well as on narrative.com, narrativ.com/podcast, where you can also find all of our previous episodes. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to leave it to Julienne to introduce our guest today.
And I'm thrilled to announce that we have Melissa Drew here, the founder of Simply Transformed, a company which guiding digital transformation initiatives to leveraging data strategies and AI technologies. Now, if you glance at her bio, you see a couple of words coming up in front of you: visionary, TEDx speaker, CDO, keynote speaker, board member, cancer warrior, entrepreneur, and author. So that should help get your listening skills going and being a little curious about what informs Melissa's work. Not only she's a founding member and a committee chair for Women Leaders in Data and AI, she's a board member of Blended, a division of Let's Talk Supply Chain, dedicated diversity inclusion in the industry. She's been a project manager. She's been a lot of stuff, but I want to hear from her right now. And you can go read her bio. And there's so much to learn from Melissa. You're truly a thought leader. So welcome. Now, one of my favorite questions is, how'd you get here? So without further ado, please explain to us about your journey in data management and also your particular focus on championing women in this area of digital transformation.
I'll start at the beginning and then I'll skip a lot in the middle. So 1995, I'm trying to put myself through college. And I decided that in order to do that, I don't want to go work at a fast food. I'm going to simply just start my own company. So myself and another guy, we got together and we decided we were going to start building databases. And, that was really when I started to understand that the value of data was helping these, small companies, construction, banking, insurance, make decisions. And through that work, I got the notice of one of my professors who got a grant from the government and said, go figure out how to do something with data and the internet. And so we reached out to the Alabama Apparel and Textile Company, because I was with Auburn University, and we built the first publicly used database in the United States where a supplier, this is going to sound really familiar, where a supplier could go to the internet, type information into a form, have the information get pulled into a database, which then was sorted and filtered in order to make better informed decisions. Now, of course, we call these now RFIs, RFPs, et cetera. But in 1997, this was the first time anybody had ever tried to connect the internet with data. The reason, as we move forward, 2004, I'm working with data and AI, building out the same kind of concepts that I was doing, as a consultant with Carney, but now working with a CEO from France, this technology engineer genius, who said, let's take what manually, and let's use AI, and let's try to take something that was taken, probably 9 weeks to filter through data and classify it and sort it. And through the use of AI models, we were able to automate it down to a couple hours. And it was just so fascinating to see 9 weeks at 70 hours of work being able to be produced exactly the way I was producing it in 3 hours. But every time I get into these, I'm working with these developers, I'm working with, technical teams, the CEOs. Every time I kept going into these steps in my career, I was the only woman. And I always had to talk louder and talk faster, because if I couldn't get my voice in, I wasn't going to be heard, because nobody in that room was going to let me in the conversation. And I was always amazed that that was a very common theme from 1995, 97 to 2004 to 2008. And as we started progressing forward, so now jump forward with Blended, we started to see the exact same problems again. After COVID, all of the funding stopped. Nobody was getting money to travel to conferences. Nobody was getting money to participate in educational opportunities. And now with the more advancement of AI technologies as mainstream, how is everybody supposed to learn? How are all the women who are the thought leaders supposed to express themselves and communicate and share their knowledge? I mean, that's really what we're doing, is when we're up there speaking, we're sharing our knowledge so that you don't have to recreate the wheel. So through this conversation during COVID, it was, well, let's stop talking about it and let's start doing something about it. And that's when Sarah Barnes Humphrey from supply chain, pulled some folks together and just did it. And so now the focus of Blended is, if you're a speaker and you want to get there, we'll help you, with travel and expenses. If you want to go to a conference because you need to learn and get upskilled so that you can be better at your job, we're going to help you with that, with, again, travel and expenses. So through the grant program that we've, been funding through donations, we have participants that apply, and then we turn around, and I hate to say it, but we give out money. I mean, what a fantastic job to give away money. I love it. Love it.
So that's a game-changing decision that you had too, that you took initiative to build what you didn't see.
Yeah. And we have a, talk about vision. We have a vision. Last year we got probably about $25,000-$30,000 in just donations, but I'd love to see us up there at, a couple $1 million a year. I want to see, you talk about that's impactful. There's so many more things that we can do to impact that. So our 5-year plan is, let's get up there. Let's try to make it even better change, more change. Let's make this into something that everybody knows. Everybody's, knows it. They don't have to go look for it. They just know it.
Yeah. And I'm curious, thanks for that intro, because it really kind of gives it, well, first of all, I think it really put into perspective for me how long you've kind of been into that data management, that even in 1995, 96, 97, that's it really puts things into perspective for me on a timeline. And I'm curious about what you were just talking about, the giving grants to people so that they can actually go to those conferences and they don't have to worry about the fees and expenses, or if they want to learn something new. Is there a particular angle for those speakers, or the things that they learn in general, or is it very kind of broad?
At the moment, we've been focused in procurement and supply chain.
Uh-huh.
We tend to we have to start somewhere. So when we market, we've been marketing in the procurement supply chain. That happens to be where most of the board members are from. That happens to be where we tend to hear more of the noise, on LinkedIn and social media. So that was our first place to start.
Got it. Yeah. That's great. What a great initiative. Yeah.
And I'm curious too, because when you talk about inclusiveness, had the pleasure of attending one of Melissa's talks the other night, a virtual webinar on chat GBT and AI, and there's a discussion about like access to information, how you procure it, but now the market is providing free resources, but also by subscription. And access to information changes a lot, or how we're organizing. Can you tell a little about that and how you're viewing that aspect of the whole shift of what we're using ChatGPT for?
Yeah, so where the market's headed, at the moment when you're using ChatGPT 3.5, that version, the data used to train that application stops, I believe we said January of around 2022. And then if you're using the 4 version or the paid version, that information stops around 2023. So one of the things that we were talking about in this conversation is, as we hear about all these technologies, we're going to have to become, and this is my new platform, we're going to have to become global AI literate citizens. We can't just take what's coming out of the results of a chat, a generative AI chat at face value. We're going to have to read the fine print. We're going to have to ask the questions. What data is being used to train this? What assumptions were being used? Because I may get results back that are 2 years old, but I'm not going to know that because I'm going to trust it. I may get results back that are slightly biased because the data behind it only use demographics in the United States, but not outside of Europe and Asia and South America. So that was the other thing that we were talking about. And then I've been privy enough, I've been lucky enough to have visibility in some new products that are coming out on the market now, where they're also using generative AI similar to ChatGPT that not only looks into the data at the client side, but then will also just pull and scrape data in real time off the internet. So now as an individual sitting here working within that, interacting with that platform, that generative AI chat, I have to be able to recognize what's my data that I know it's not just about security, but I know the data is accurate because it's inside my house, versus now the answer is being combined with my data plus just some random data that's being scraped off the internet. And when you stop and think about that, and going back to your question, Jerome, about just the concept of data last 30 years, we're now generating zettabytes of data. Back in 1997, we were talking about terabytes of data, which is considered now such a small portion of the concept of data. Now it's zettabytes and petabytes and yo-yo bytes. And I heard that whoever they are has now added 2 more tiers of layers of how to describe the concept of such large data, areas. But just me throwing out zettabytes and petabytes, if you're not truly, literate in these conversations around data, I have no concept of how big a zettabyte or a petabyte is.
It's so interesting. The AI, we see so many, especially in the last year or so, have been seeing so many headlines, right, regarding ChatGPT and other things. And a lot of it seems so, at least I'll speak for myself, kind of mysterious and a little bit overwhelming, right? And maybe if we have more kind of nefarious thoughts, maybe even unsafe, right? And so, but then of course, there's on the other side of it, there's people who are extremely optimistic and enthusiastic about AI and the ways that we can use it. And hearing you speak about the need to be data literate, I wonder because this will be interesting to our listeners, what are the steps towards becoming data literate?
That's a really good question. I'm going to give you an example, and because I like stories. I think that's the whole point of this call, is I love stories.
We do too.
So I did look it up, by the way. This is the power of being able to do this on the internet. 1 zettabyte is 1 trillion gigabytes.
Wow.
That's a lot.
So it's a lot of data that we're pulling in. There was a study by the Pew Research Center last year, 2023, that said 44% of Americans do not believe that they regularly interact with AI. And I found that very perplexing, because we are interacting with AI, and we have been interacting with AI since, the last 4 or 5 years. If you're using the Starbucks app and getting recommendations on what to drink, or how, the reward system, they're using AI. They're using over 400, I think it's 400,000 or 4,000 different variables to try to find that match for you. If you're on Amazon or Netflix and you're getting recommendations on what to buy or what videos you should be watching, that's using AI technologies. But yet 44% of the Americans didn't believe that they were interacting with it.
I own up, I always have conversations one way or the other, positive and negative,
Yeah.
on any given day, but I'm fully conscious it's there, it's lurking.
And whether or not you get a credit card today, whether or not you qualify for a mortgage, the decisions in the diagnostic decisions in your x-rays, those are all utilizing AI today. So some of these things, we interact with them when we don't realize it. And some of these things, like the back end that you don't see, the credit card, the mortgage, and the x-rays, those are all things that we're interacting with, but we just aren't aware of it. So when we look at all of this, and this is, why this platform of a global AI citizen has come into place, in order for us to be AI literate, we have to be aware of what and how much data we're creating. We have to understand when and how our personal data is being stored, shared, deleted, and sold to a third party. An AI literate citizen is someone who can feel confident that they understand how the data is being used in the products and services that they consume and interact with. Which means, in order for someone to really be AI literate, they have to understand, what questions should I be asking? And am I even asking the right questions? That's a lot for just an average normal person going around doing their day-to-day job. This is how, and again, this is just my perspective, but in order for us to really understand what we're interacting with and how it impacts us individually, there's a lot that I just unpacked that would allow you to get to that level of comfort.
Yeah. And if you heard any crinkling before, it's because I turned a page, because I was taking notes as you're saying. Even though we have recording, I was like, why am I taking notes? I can listen to it later. But it was really hitting me, because critical thinking is more important than ever. And not taking things at face value, and looking and taking the step back. It's the stranger in the room, basically. We have this new entity, or it keeps growing and evolving. And how do we teach ourselves and others to step back and ask good questions, and listen, and just develop trusted resource? But that's a huge order, and not everyone has access to a lot of things that we do.
I appreciate what you said, because it does sound like that's the first step, is awareness, creating awareness, right? Even just that statistic that you gave us. I mean, the moment we start to see data points like that are just so clear, then it tells me, then it's much easier, I think, or I don't know if easier is the right term, but it's certainly a step in the right direction to just see, hey, actually, by the way, 44% of the population thinks that, they're not interacting with AI. But here are the ways in which you're interacting with it. And immediately I understand that, right? It's just that the perception of what AI is, I don't even know that 2 or 3 years ago, even that recently, I was necessarily, if you had told me about AI, I'm not sure what my reference would have been, right? And you pointing out these things from day-to-day life, Starbucks, Amazon, Netflix, etc. It's like, oh yeah, of course that's AI. But it's only recently that's kind of come up in our consciousness, at least mine. And the way it's come up is that there's this thing that if you put in a question or a prompt or something, it's going to spit out something that'll change your life, because it's going to create, in our case, perhaps it'll create a story for a client, right? Or it'll create an essay for someone who's applying to college, or it'll create whatever else we've heard, right? And so I think that's a really important distinction, to kind of understand that, no, it's actually been here, and it takes different forms. And maybe the one that's been most publicized or promoted is kind of the newest form. Is that a kind of correct way of looking at things according to you?
I think there's a couple things in there that I heard. Are you asking why the generative AI chat is better than the internet, or how we're perceiving it?
How we're perceiving it. I think that's kind of where I was going with that, because it seems like the perception of AI itself is, it's kind of all over the place. AI is this, AI is that. And
Mhm.
just so I guess with your response earlier, what that kind of brought home for me was just the need to create some awareness around even what AI is, because there are so many different perceptions of what it is. And maybe they're all right, but it seems to me like they're just, whatever the perception is, it's one part of it.
The term AI technologies is a broad umbrella, and I think that's where some of the confusion is coming from. When you hear anybody say the word AI technologies, you know, underneath that umbrella is a variety of different types of AI.
Hmm.
It's natural, NML, natural machine language. It's machine learning, deep learning, and these are all, subsets of one another. There's computer vision. Computer vision, perfect example, Tesla. Tesla has those, cameras on the outside of the car that pulls in information. Computer vision could be a camera taking a picture of you and then taking that face and then finding you in a database to look up your health information. That's a type of computer vision where that technology is in the back end. The whole concept of all of these technologies is to be able to take zettabytes of data and sift through them so quickly that it comes back with a response. But now take that to the next level. If I take that to the next level, which you just mentioned, it's not just getting me a response. The internet can do that. It's taking all the information and either consolidating in a way that I didn't need to do because it took too much time. And then it's taking it and consolidating it, and then it can now provide you recommendations. So it's not just pulling in data from the internet. It's pulling in data from the internet, and then it's twisting it around and providing you with recommendations. Here's options of how you could approach this. It's helping you make better informed decisions in a way that we've never been able to do before. And the technology has been around. I brought up that I've been using it since 2004 purposely. The only reason that it's become so out in the market in the last 5 years has to do a lot with the processing chips, the chip manufacturers, the IBMs and the Intels. If they couldn't have developed the chips that allowed us to synthesize all this data, we wouldn't be able to be where we are now. We'd still be kind of where we were back in 2004. So between the technology shift and the architecture of the silicon chip, on top of someone like OpenAI with ChatGPT, that combination is what really catalyzed. I mean, it was really just exploded out onto the internet. Everything else that we've talked about, credit cards, diagnostic imaging, the decisions of which kidney transplant recipients are going to be prioritized, those were all things that were behind the scenes that we didn't see. It was really OpenAI that kind of brought it out into the world and said, hey, AI is not just an application thing, it's an everybody thing. And that's what changed everything.
So I'm going to ask a question about creativity and take it closer to home first, and then also relay what I've heard other clients and students talking about. So in the past, when I've done speeches and things, I go in first and I ruminate about what I've been listening to and what I've been here. And I tell myself, do not cheat. Do not go to Google. Do not go and see what other people are talking about. Go and listen to your voice first, and then do some research afterwards just to confirm whether it's doing a program, organizing learning materials, or doing a talk.
Hmm.
A few months ago, as you know, there was a strike that was settled with SAG-AFTRA because the union was very concerned about how AI was going to affect them and what the outputs were going to be. What is your thought of what are some things you've been thinking about creativity and using AI for the amazing things it does, but also teaching us to trust our gut and not lazy maybe about putting our own voice out there and taking some chances?
So you're asking my perspective on using AI
Yeah, and
to generate.
I'll help a little bit here because when I heard my question afterwards. I work with students and I work with people where they start, oh, I'm just going to put it into ChatGPT and put my answer, and that'll give me a scripted answer to help. And I believe start with yourself, get confidence, and use it to maybe tweak a few things, but just don't make that your crutch, because I think there's an upside and downside for everything, that we can start to doubt our confidence and being able to solve some problems. So
It's a
definitely have an
tricky.
opinion.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
but it is
example you
tricky.
gave is the tricky one.
Yeah.
um, I went into ChatGPT and I said, write me a short, funny poem about losing a puppy written from a 10-year-old girl. In less than 10 seconds, I got my poem. And it was way funnier and better than I could have done. And it was written from a 10-year-old's viewpoint with her
Wow.
terminology and language. Fantastic. If I had picked that up and put it on the internet and called it my own, I think that would be incorrect. What you're asking about is this borderline of ethics.
Mm.
What I can tell you that I've been following this. There have been a lot of colleges, particularly doctorates, that have been discussing whether or not AI should be used in research. And if it is, should it be noted as an individual on the research paper? And the way it was finally decided in these doctoral programs is AI is just another tool. Whether or not you had a research assistant to go find information, it's just a tool. And you should put in your notes that you used AI to help you research, but AI is not an individual and it did not make the final decision. It provided you information that then you, as you mentioned, took that information and combined it with your own perspectives and your own experiences. We talked about that, your own experiences over the course of X amount of years, and then you pulled it together and you wrote your doctoral statement. Your example, though, was a little bit different because it goes back to what I guess earlier, I asked it to write a poem and then I picked it up and I could have put it in the paper and I could have sold it as my own. That's an ethical question that each individual is going to have to answer.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's not correct, but I also know a lot of students who would just do it. And the ethical thing would be to say, I used AI to help me write this. But how many, 10-year-olds, 14-year-olds are going to think that way?
It's really interesting, this subject of ethics, because we do a lot of work all over the world with marginalized populations and people who are working towards changing certain systems that are discriminatory, especially in the healthcare field, for example. So for example, we've worked with Roma people all over Eastern Europe, and helping them to tell stories that essentially will help them advocate for themselves and for better healthcare, because there's so much discrimination against Roma people in those parts of the world. And one of the things that we had to do very early on was describe ethical guidelines for telling stories, telling personal stories about oneself and one's health, as part of being an advocate, and also ethical guidelines, more specifically, how to use those stories ethically. Because a lot of people, because it was their personal lives that were at stake, they immediately kind of went for the call to action and said, yes, of course, I'm going to tell my story so that I can change things. But then their story gets taken by a journalist and put into a completely different context that actually portrays them as, they use it as the people who are against what they're advocating for. And so
Mhm.
suddenly their story is used for something they had never anticipated. And so that's why we did that. We had to kind of come up with these ethical guidelines and get people to be aware of the various ways, positive and negative, that your stories might be used, and then and only then consent to still do this work, right? And have the choice to say, no, I'm actually not going to do it. I've worked with you for months, and I'm now ready to tell my story. But actually, at this moment in time, I don't want to tell it publicly, right? And so it's just something. What I'm this conversation, what it's bringing up is the number one thing you said at the beginning was creating awareness around when and how our data gets scraped, and why it is and where could it be used. And now this ethics of how do we actually use AI for ourselves. And it seems like structure is needed. And sort of, and I use the term guidelines because it's sometimes hard for people to even realize the various ways that something might be used in the future. Something I never anticipated. So I don't really have a question. It's more of a comment of
Mhm.
what might be needed in future, and also from that perspective of like we're constantly putting personal data out there, and so many times we just have no idea how it's being used. And I guess what I'm hearing through this conversation is a need for more awareness around all these things.
It's on both sides.
Mm,
We, so I'm formerly IBM, formerly Deloitte. Both have very robust, AI groups, and both of them have promoted, you know, um, 5 primary things that need to happen if you're an application that's utilizing AI. And one of those is this concept of a fact sheet. You need to be able to communicate to the individuals using your applications and services where the data is coming from, and did you make any assumptions in the data. um, if your data, if you're selling something that's supposed to be healthcare related, and you've only trained the data based on 3 hospitals and 400 people, that's probably not enough data to ensure that you're getting some accurate results about how it's going to predict a future health diagnoses. um, so those are things that they, there's a, it's out there, but that was one of the things that they have really tried to focus on. And at the moment, you talked about guardrails. That's just a really good suggestion. um, we're hoping that the industry will accept that and adopt that. We're seeing some companies do that because they think it's the right thing to do, but there are majority of the companies out there that if they don't have to do it, and if the public is not asking them for it, if there's no demand for it, then why should they put the effort in? Which then comes back to being an AI literate citizen. If you know that this is how things work, and you've gone through the steps that we talked about earlier, then because of this awareness, you will then raise this as, I need to this. I'm demanding it, and the public's demanding it, which will then change the behavior of these industries.
So I'm going to pivot for a second and make an observation that I had about myself the other night when I got off your call with your
Yeah.
group, and you were teaching everybody how they were gathering information, how they could work. And I realized I had been serving as ChatGPT for my husband over the years, because I have issued him scripts on occasion when I've had a bad day. And I was like, when you come home, ask me this question. Do not ask me this question. This would be
mm.
the preferred response, and here's where you should take it. And when you do come home, I'll say, thank you very much. That was very nice of you to ask. So your learning just sparked a lot of like, it's about perspective. Sometimes it's saying, where does this bring value, and where is this going to get me into trouble? And let me ask some critical thinking. So I
I
do
love that.
appreciate you and your ability to disrupt our listening and our awareness and educate. You're on a
Yeah.
very important mission.
Absolutely. And that's really my big takeaway here is, becoming an AI literate citizen. It's I mean, it's essential right now. It's kind of the next step I mean, I was just talking about advocacy, right? That's what we're advocating for now or you're in a better position to advocate for something if you know what it's about, and if you know how it's truly affecting your life and the life of others. So yeah,
I think you've both inspired me to go find, I'm going to be now the founder of the AI Literate Citizen Foundation.
Mm.
It's official.
Uh,
I will go
Okay.
get a website up and I will start that off right away, because I mean, this is something I've been doing on my own, but I've never had a conversation out loud like this on this topic. And this isn't, you're right, it's not just in the US, it's not just Canada, it's global. And some countries are going to be more educated and literate. It's just a matter of knowledge. Other countries, I think some that you mentioned earlier, are going to need more, more documentation, more focus, because globally we all have to be on the same page. This isn't just a us or them, or that industry or this industry or that country or the other country.
yeah. Yeah, and well, that's wonderful. I love this,
Proud.
and
Heard
you
it here.
definitely, yeah, and you've
You
got
heard it here,
witnesses.
yeah. Now I gotta go do it.
I
Now
know. I
you're
was
gonna
going to say
go
you've
design a
got.
flag though and stick it in the ground. This is
I'm
it.
gonna write this down.
Land
That's
of
right.
Melissa.
And you've said it with witnesses present, so and those
Now I gotta go
we
do
can't
it.
see right now, but yeah, we'll hold you to it. But no, I think that's wonderful. And so there's a question that we always ask of all of our guests, and I would like to ask it to you now. What could you tell us about an experience that has influenced or shaped who you are today, and perhaps still influences who you are today?
I'm glad that I was reminded of this question by Jules. Thank you very much, Julian.
Welcome.
Because I recognized that unfortunately there's no one, bump in the road. When Julian called me and said how you've shaped to where you are today, I realized that, there was, bumps along the way. Not just one, each one of them shaped a little bit differently of how I interact with the world, how I feel about myself. Um, Personal things that happened early on, and then, layoff, from 9/11, taught me that I have to constantly reinvent myself, which I'd never thought of before. And that concept of reinventing myself is what's allowed me to do all the things that I've done. That I have to continuously take what's going on in the industry and reinvent myself. One of the bosses, one of my supervisors, she taught me about this, personal advisory council. That as you go through your life, you're going to find people that don't think like you do, different ages, different religions, man, woman, you need to find people that you can pull in and interact with periodically throughout your life, because they're going to give you different perspectives. And that's this, personal counsel that I've constantly kept with me. The fact that I need to take time off for myself. That was the first lesson I learned working for, a group of people, in early stages. I walked into the boss's office and said, I am working with stupid people. Like, that was exactly the way I said it. I am so frustrated. I am working with stupid people. Not the best thing to say to your boss, but he was the best guy ever. He sat me down, he closed the door, and the first thing he asked me was, when's the last time you took a day off? And it threw me for a loop. And I thought about it, and I'm like, and the more I paused, the more he's like, well, that tells me a lot right there. So going forward, you will take one Friday off every month, period. No questions asked. I don't want you pick a Friday, but one Friday off every month. And I want you to take downtime. I want you to think. I want you to go swimming, go play baseball, do whatever. But it was the first time I learned that I had to take time for myself. And it was really, really impactful to learn it so early on. But every single thing that's happened, these big major, points in my life, gave me different areas, the moral code, being fiercely loyal, all of these things, Julian, said it earlier. I am my person that I am right now because of all these little experiences that pivoted me in some way, that formed and dented and molded me in some way. So unfortunately, I can't pick just one.
No, it's wonderful. I love your answer, and yes, there's no right or wrong way to answer this question, but and that's the beauty of it too, and why we like to ask it of every guest is, we fantasize at some point about having kind of a tapestry of all these answers, because it gives us a little glimpse into people's experiences and personal experiences, and that, I know for me, the takeaway is just the importance of those relationships you've made along the way, and the people who kind of, steered you a certain way or planted a seed in you. And that's what I find we kind of all have in common as humans, right? It's the people that we interact with that really teach us something, and then we take it or we don't. But whatever it is, what you said about molding as well, and dents, and great. Love it. So thank you so
Just
much
to clarify,
for that.
since this is a recording, I don't think people are stupid. This was like, because I just realized what I said out loud. I was like, wait, I need to clarify this because it's going to be on the internet forever. This was back in 1997 at the very beginning of my career, and I was in my early 20s. So we'll just keep it at that.
Yes, got it. Thank you. Thanks for the
Keep it at
context.
She's drawing on the youth clause.
Yeah.
That's right.
And your boss deserves credit because he didn't just yell at you or admonish you or made you feel bad or dismiss you. He took it and gave you a learning moment and a care moment. So wherever he is, if you're still talking to him, he deserves a
yes,
gold star in that education realm.
The first impression, and how he reacted to me, I've tried to do the same thing when I, first hear somebody, especially my kids.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Context.
I'm curious, Melissa, if so we heard about the idea of the AI Literate Citizen Foundation. Do you have any recommendations or resources that people can go to either learn more about you or what you do, or any of the stuff that we talked about today?
I'm on LinkedIn. That's the only social media. I don't know how you guys keep up with all those social media platforms. Like that's really amazing. I applaud you. I'm clapping. I applaud you for that one. I'm on LinkedIn. That's where you can find me. I'm pretty much nowhere else. Yeah.
Great.
And as far as I think
you have a website, Melissa, you do have a website. You know that, right?
I do.
You have a website.
I'm working on it. Of course, now, and I wrote it down. Now I'm going to go create a new website for the new AI Literate Citizen Foundation.
Great. You heard it here first, folks. So you can go to that website. By the time this gets published, I'm sure it'll be up. Well, I just want to thank you, Melissa, for your time and openness. And, I wish we had more time, because it feels like there's so many more things we could get into around this topic. And maybe that's something we could do a little bit further into the future, see how things have evolved and where we are.
A year from now?
Yeah, a year from now.
Let's revisit this in 12 months and say, hey, Melissa, did you actually start the foundation you just committed to?
Love it. Love it. Yeah, let's do it. Great. Well, thanks so much for taking the time. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Julienne, for making that connection in the first place.
Yes, Melissa's been a joy. It's always wonderful. I learn every time I speak with her, and I continue to learn more and more. So I'm very excited for her journey. So thank you.
Well, you guys are awesome, and thanks for inviting me.
Of course. And we'll see you in 12 months from now on this very show. So I want to thank our listeners as well. And if you've been inspired by this session, to please consider enrolling yourself or your team in our group and one-on-one training programs that focus on leadership development, sales, team building, and employee engagement. You can go to narrative.com, NARATIV.com, to enroll. And you can visit our website for information on how you can find, craft, present stories that are going to engage your audiences like nothing else has before. We're always ready to listen. And as always, thanks for listening. And don't forget to subscribe. Leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. You can also go to YouTube if you want to see us in more dimensions than one, as this all drives word of mouth. So please keep coming back and leave reviews. Until next time, thanks again, Melissa. Thanks, Julienne, for co-hosting with me as always.
Very much. Always
All
a joy.
right.
Bye,
Thanks.
everyone. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
For more information on the narrative listening and storytelling method and how it can help your business, go to narrative.com.